In the scorching heat of the Afghan mountains, where the air is so thin that bullets lose their bite and distance becomes an enemy more dangerous than any insurgent, a young woman named Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez was about to make a shot that military experts would later call impossible. The year was 2018, and the war in Afghanistan had been raging for 17 years.
Countless soldiers had come and gone, but none had ever attempted what Elena was preparing to do that morning. At 3,600 meters over 2 miles away, a high-value Taliban commander was coordinating an attack that would claim dozens of American lives within hours.
Most snipers consider 1,500 meters an extraordinary shot. The current world record stood at 3,540 meters, achieved by a Canadian Special Forces sniper just months earlier. What Elena was attempting would not just break that record, it would shatter the very understanding of what was humanly possible with a rifle. As she adjusted the scope on her M24 sniper weapon system for the 100th time, calculating wind speed, humidity, elevation, and the rotation of the Earth itself, Elena had no idea that her finger on the trigger was about to write a new chapter in military history. She had no idea that the general reading her after-action report would stare at the numbers in disbelief, demand 3 separate investigations, and ultimately change the entire doctrine of long-range warfare. This is the true story of the woman who redefined the impossible, one breath at a time. Elena Rodriguez grew up in a small town in rural Montana where shooting wasn't just a hobby, it was a way of life. Her father, Miguel, had served 2 tours in Vietnam as an infantryman and returned home with stories he rarely shared and skills he passed down without fanfare.
Every weekend, from the time Elena could hold a rifle steady, father and daughter would trek into the wilderness behind their modest ranch house, where Miguel taught her that shooting was part science, part art, and entirely about patience. "Breathing is everything, mija," Miguel would say. As 10-year-old Elena struggled to hit targets at 200 yards,
"The rifle doesn't know you're in a hurry. The bullet doesn't care about your emotions. You breathe, you aim, you squeeze. Everything else is just noise." Elena's mother, Sarah, worried about her daughter's fascination with firearms. While other girls her age were playing with dolls and dreaming of prom dresses, Elena spent hours cleaning rifle barrels and calculating bullet trajectories on notebook paper. But Miguel understood something his wife didn't yet grasp. In Elena's steady hands and focused mind, he recognized a natural gift that appeared maybe once in a generation. By the time Elena turned 16, she was consistently hitting targets at distances that impressed even the local sheriff, a former Marine who often joined their weekend shooting sessions. Her high school didn't have a shooting team, so Elena competed in civilian marksmanship competitions across the state. She won her first tournament at 17, beating seasoned adults who had been shooting competitively for decades. The recruiters found Elena during her senior year of high school. It wasn't just her shooting scores that caught their attention, though. Those were certainly impressive. Elena had graduated as valedictorian while working part-time at her uncle's auto repair shop. Her grades in physics and mathematics were exceptional, and her teachers described her as someone who approached problems with analytical precision that bordered on the obsessive. "Have you ever considered military service?" asked Staff Sergeant Williams, the Army recruiter who drove 3 hours from Billings to meet with Elena personally. He had seen her competition scores and knew talent when it crossed his desk. Elena had been planning to study engineering at Montana State University on an academic scholarship. The military had never seriously crossed her mind, despite her father's service. But something about Staff Sergeant Williams's description of military occupational specialties caught her attention. He spoke about roles that demanded technical expertise, physical conditioning, and mental resilience. He mentioned advanced training opportunities that could rival any university education. "What about sniper school?" Elena asked during their second meeting. She had been researching military careers online and discovered that the Army Sniper School was considered one of the most challenging training programs in any branch of service. Staff Sergeant Williams paused. In his 8 years as a recruiter, no female recruit had ever asked about sniper training. The program had only been officially opened to women the previous year, and the physical and mental demands were notorious for breaking even the most prepared candidates. "It's possible," he said carefully, "but you'd need to complete basic training, advanced individual training, and serve with distinction in a combat arms unit first. Even then, selection for sniper school is extremely competitive. Most candidates have years of combat experience before they're even considered." Elena's decision surprised everyone except her father. Miguel recognized the look in his daughter's eyes. It was the same expression she wore when calculating long-range shots, completely focused and quietly determined. Sarah cried for 3 days after Elena announced her intention to enlist, but she also understood. that trying to change her daughter's mind would be futile. Basic training at Fort Leonard Wood was Elena's first real test.
The physical demands were significant, but Elena had spent years hauling hay bales and working on farm equipment. Her body was strong and resilient. More challenging were the psychological pressures designed to break down civilian thinking patterns and rebuild them along military lines. Elena excelled in areas that surprised her drill sergeants. While other recruits struggled with weapons maintenance and marksmanship, Elena cleaned her M4 carbine with precision that impressed even the most demanding instructors. Her marksmanship scores were exceptional, but she was careful not to show off. Elena had learned from her father that reputation was earned through consistent performance, not flashy displays. The mental aspects of military training came naturally to Elena as well. She understood that discipline wasn't about following orders blindly, but about trusting systems and procedures that had been tested under pressure. When drill sergeants screamed instructions during high-stress exercises, Elena's heart rate remained steady. She had learned years ago that external chaos didn't have to create internal confusion. After basic training, Elena was assigned to advanced individual training for infantry at Fort Benning. This was where her unusual background began to attract attention from instructors. Most infantry soldiers were male, and many came from urban backgrounds where firearms experience was limited. About history, Elena's combination of technical knowledge, shooting ability, and calm demeanor under pressure made her stand out immediately. During a field exercise in her 8th week of training, Elena's platoon was conducting a simulated attack on an enemy position when their designated marksman was killed by opposing forces. The exercise was supposed to continue with reduced capabilities, but Elena approached her platoon leader with a suggestion. "Sergeant, I can provide overwatch from that ridgeline," she said, pointing to an elevated position roughly 400 meters from the objective. "If you give me 10 minutes to get into position, I can suppress the enemy machine gun nest that's been stopping our advance." The platoon leader, Sergeant First Class Morrison, was initially skeptical.
Elena was still in training and hadn't been certified as a designated marksman.
But the exercise had stalled, and creative problem-solving was part of what they were supposed to be learning. "You think you can make that shot?" Morrison asked. "Yes, Sergeant." Elena's confidence wasn't bravado. She had calculated the distance, estimated wind conditions, and factored in the slight elevation change. The target wasn't particularly difficult by the standards she had grown up with, but it was challenging enough to demonstrate her capabilities to the training cadre. She made the shot on her second attempt. The first round was close enough to convince the exercise controllers that the machine gun position would have been suppressed. But Elena knew it was slightly left of center. She adjusted her aim point and fired again. This time, the shot was perfect. After the exercise, Sergeant First Class Morrison pulled Elena aside for a conversation that would change the trajectory of her military career. He had been watching her performance throughout training and noticed qualities that went beyond basic shooting ability. "Rodriguez, have you given any thought to specialized training?" Morrison asked. "Your shooting is obviously exceptional, but that's not the only thing that matters for advanced roles. You stay calm under pressure, you think strategically about positioning and timing, and you don't let ego interfere with mission accomplishment." Elena had been hoping for this conversation, but she didn't want to appear too eager. "I'm interested in any opportunity to serve effectively, Sergeant." Morrison smiled. "There's a selection process for advanced marksmanship training that happens twice a year. It's challenging, and most candidates don't make it through. But based on what I've seen, I think you should apply." The application process for sniper school was more complex than Elena had anticipated. Physical fitness standards were higher than standard infantry requirements. Psychological evaluations were designed to identify candidates who could handle the isolation and pressure of long-range precision shooting. Academic testing covered advanced mathematics, physics, and tactical planning. Elena spent months preparing for selection while completing her regular infantry training. She woke up an hour before formation every morning to work on physical conditioning. She studied ballistics textbooks during her free time and practiced range estimation exercises until she could accurately judge distances up to 1,000 meters without technological assistance. The hardest part of preparation was the psychological component. Elena had always been comfortable working independently, but sniper operations required a different kind of mental resilience. Snipers often spent days in concealed positions, moving minimally while maintaining complete focus on their assigned sector. They had to be prepared to take human life from distances where the target appeared almost abstract, yet they also needed to maintain emotional stability and moral clarity about their actions. Elena's father helped her work through these psychological challenges during her leave periods. Miguel had never been a sniper, but he understood the mental demands of combat and the importance of maintaining perspective about the purpose of military action. "The hardest thing isn't pulling the trigger, mija.
Miguel told her during one of their weekend shooting sessions. The hardest thing is living with yourself afterward and remembering why you chose to serve. You protect people by stopping threats they can't handle themselves. That's a responsibility, not a game. When Elena received notification that she had been accepted for sniper selection, she felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension that she hadn't experienced since childhood. This was what she had been working toward for over 2 years, but she also understood that acceptance into selection was only the beginning of a much more challenging journey. The night before she departed for sniper school at Fort Benning, Elena called her parents from the base phone. Sarah was still worried about her daughter's chosen path, but she had come to understand that Elena's military service was about more than shooting ability or career advancement. "Are you ready for this?" Sarah asked. Elena looked out the window of the barracks at other soldiers preparing for their own advanced training programs.
Some would become rangers, others would pursue special forces training, and a few would attempt selection for even more specialized units. They were all volunteers who had chosen to push themselves beyond standard military service in pursuit of excellence.
"I'm ready," Elena said, and for the first time since enlisting she felt completely certain about her answer. The United States Army Sniper School at Fort Benning was nothing like Elena had imagined. She had expected rigorous physical training and intensive marksmanship instruction, but the reality was far more complex and demanding than any description could have prepared her for. The course lasted 7 weeks, and in the first 3 days, nearly 20% of the candidates had already been removed from training. Elena was one of only 2 women in her class of 48 candidates. The other woman, Staff Sergeant Jennifer Walsh, was a combat veteran with 3 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. Walsh had earned her way into sniper school through exceptional performance as a designated marksman, and her presence helped Elena understand that gender was irrelevant to the instructors. What mattered was performance under pressure and the ability to meet standards that had been developed over decades of combat experience. The first week focused on fieldcraft and concealment techniques that challenged every assumption Elena had about military operations. Sniper teams operated differently from regular infantry units. Instead of overwhelming firepower and rapid movement, they relied on stealth, patience, and precision. Elena learned to construct ghillie suits that could make her virtually invisible in natural terrain. She practiced movement techniques that allowed her to travel hundreds of meters without being detected by observers who knew approximately where she was hiding. "Forget everything you think you know about shooting," said Master Sergeant Rodriguez, the chief instructor who shared Elena's surname but no family connection. "Any decent infantry soldier can hit targets at 300 meters. You're here to learn how to engage threats at distances where wind drift, humidity, temperature, and elevation changes can move your bullets several feet from your point of aim. You're also here to learn how to get close enough to those targets without being detected, and how to escape afterward without compromising your position." The academic portion of sniper training was more intensive than Elena's college-level physics courses. Students learned ballistics calculations that went far beyond basic marksmanship principles. They studied weather patterns and how atmospheric conditions affected bullet flight over long distances. They memorized data about dozens of different ammunition types and how each performed under various environmental conditions. Elena discovered that successful sniping required mathematical precision that appealed to her analytical mind. Every shot was a complex equation involving multiple variables that had to be calculated quickly and accurately. Wind speed at the firing position might be different from wind conditions halfway to the target. Temperature changes throughout the day would affect how gunpowder burned and how fast bullets traveled. Even the rotation of the Earth became a factor for extremely long-range shots. During the 3rd week of training, 20 faced her first major crisis. The class was conducting a stalking exercise where students had to approach within 200 meters of instructor positions without being detected. Elena had successfully completed several similar exercises, but this one included additional complications designed to test advanced fieldcraft skills. Elena spent 4 hours moving approximately 800 meters through dense Georgia woodland. She estimated that she had covered the distance without detection and was preparing to take her final shot when one of the instructors walked directly to her position. "Rodriguez, you're compromised," the instructor said. "Pack up your equipment and report to the assembly area." Elena was devastated. She had been certain that her approach was undetectable. During the after-action review, the instructor explained what had given away her position. "Your ghillie suit was perfect, and your movement was textbook," he said. "But you forgot about the sun angle. For about 30 seconds around 1400 hours, sunlight was reflecting off your rifle scope directly toward our observation post. In a combat environment, that reflection would have resulted in immediate indirect fire on your position. The lesson was humbling but valuable." Elena realized that sniper training wasn't just about shooting accuracy or physical endurance. It required a level of attention to detail that accounted for factors most people never considered.
She began approaching each exercise with even more systematic preparation, checking and rechecking every piece of equipment for anything that might compromise her position. The marksmanship portion of training began in the 4th week, and this was where Elena's background finally became a significant advantage.
While other students struggled to hit targets accurately at 600 meters, Elena was consistently placing shots within the required scoring rings. The instructors noticed her performance but didn't offer any special recognition.
Elena understood that demonstrating basic competency was expected, not celebrated. "Rodriguez, you're shooting well at known distances," Master Sergeant Rodriguez told her after a particularly successful range session.
But combat isn't conducted on a flat range with measured distances and controlled conditions. We need to see how you perform when you don't know exactly how far away your target is, and when you have to make rapid calculations under time pressure.
The unknown distance exercises were Elena's first real test of her sniper training. Students were presented with targets at ranges varying from 300 to 1,000 meters.
They had to estimate distance, calculate ballistic solutions, and engage targets within strict time limits. Missing the target resulted in immediate failure of the exercise.
Elena's approach to these exercises reflected her father's teachings about patience and systematic thinking. While some students rushed their calculations and fired quickly, Elena took time to carefully analyze each target and environmental condition. Her measured approach sometimes meant she was the last student to fire, but her accuracy was consistently among the highest in the class. The psychological pressure intensified during the 5th week, when students began engaging human silhouette targets instead of bullseye targets. This transition was designed to help students mentally prepare for the reality of combat shooting, where targets would be enemy combatants rather than paper circles. Elena found this adjustment more challenging than she had anticipated. Her father had prepared her intellectually for the possibility of taking human life in combat, but seeing human-shaped targets through her rifle scope created an emotional response she hadn't expected. She performed adequately during these exercises, but the experience forced her to confront the psychological realities of her chosen military specialty. During evening instruction periods, the class received detailed briefings about the legal and ethical responsibilities of military snipers. Elena learned about rules of engagement, target identification procedures, and the importance of maintaining accurate records of all engagements.
Snipers were held to higher standards of accountability than most combat soldiers because their actions were deliberate and precise rather than reactive. "Every round you fire in combat will be investigated," explained Captain Martinez, the officer in charge of the ethics instruction. "You'll need to document your justification for each engagement. Describe the target identification process you used and explain how your action supported the overall mission. Snipers don't have the luxury of claiming they acted in the heat of battle.
Your actions are calculated and intentional, which means they're subject to much more scrutiny." These briefings helped Elena understand that being selected as a sniper meant accepting a higher level of responsibility than standard infantry service. She would be trusted with capabilities that could influence tactical situations from significant distances, but she would also be held accountable for how she used those capabilities. The final exercise of sniper school was a comprehensive field problem that lasted 4 days. Student teams were assigned objectives that required them to demonstrate all the skills they had learned throughout the course. They had to plan routes, establish observation posts, gather intelligence about simulated enemy positions, and engage designated targets while avoiding detection.
Elena was paired with Staff Sergeant Walsh for this exercise. The two women had developed an effective working relationship throughout the course, and their different backgrounds complemented each other well.
Walsh's combat experience helped with tactical decision-making, while Elena's technical skills contributed to accurate long-range engagements. Their assigned objective was to eliminate a high-value target who was scheduled to meet with other simulated enemy leaders at a location roughly 1,200 meters from their insertion point. The terrain between their starting position and the target area included open ground, wooded areas, and elevated observation positions that could compromise their approach. Elena and Walsh spent the first day conducting route planning and equipment preparation. They studied topographic maps, identified potential firing positions, and planned primary and alternate extraction routes. Elena calculated ballistic solutions for various distances and environmental conditions they might encounter. The approach to their objective took nearly 18 hours. Elena and Walsh moved primarily during darkness and early morning hours when visibility was limited. They established temporary observation posts every few hours to confirm their route and check for signs of compromise. When they finally reached their planned firing position, Elena discovered that the actual distance to the target area was approximately 1,350 meters, significantly longer than their initial estimate. She had to recalculate her ballistic solution while accounting for the different elevation and wind conditions they encountered. The target appeared on schedule, but Elena immediately identified a problem.
Simulated enemy leader was positioned among several other individuals, and the rules of engagement required positive identification before engaging. Elena had to wait for the target to move into a position where she could engage without risk to nearby personnel who might be civilians or low-value combatants. Elena's patience was tested for over 2 hours as she maintained her firing position while waiting for an appropriate engagement opportunity. Walsh provided security and helped with target identification, but the final decision about when to shoot remained Elena's responsibility. When the opportunity finally presented itself, Elena had less than 30 seconds to confirm target identification, finalize her ballistic calculations, and take the shot. She controlled her breathing, aligned her rifle scope, and squeezed the trigger with the same steady pressure her father had taught her years earlier. The shot was perfect. Elena's bullet struck the target precisely where she had aimed, and the exercise controllers immediately confirmed a successful engagement. Elena and Walsh then had to execute their planned extraction while avoiding simulated enemy forces that were responding to their position. The extraction was successful, and Elena felt a sense of accomplishment that was different from anything she had experienced previously. She had successfully completed one of the most challenging training programs in the military, but more importantly, she had proven to herself that she could perform under pressure when lives depended on her actions. During the graduation ceremony, Elena received her sniper qualification badge and was officially designated as a qualified military sniper. Only 28 of the original 48 candidates had successfully completed the course. Elena's class ranking was 3rd overall, and she had demonstrated exceptional performance in both marksmanship and fieldcraft. Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached Elena after the ceremony with news about her follow-on assignment. She was being assigned to the 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, one of the Army's premier special operations units. Rangers operated in the most challenging combat environments, and Elena's assignment reflected the confidence her instructors had in her abilities. "Rodriguez, you've earned this opportunity through your performance here, but sniper school was just the beginning," Master Sergeant Rodriguez told her. "Rangers will expect you to perform at an even higher level, and you'll be working with some of the most experienced special operations soldiers in the military. Don't let the training go to your head, but don't underestimate what you've accomplished either." Elena understood that her real education was just beginning. Sniper school had taught her technical skills and tactical procedures, but combat would test everything she had learned under conditions that no training environment could fully replicate. As she prepared for her first assignment with the Rangers, Elena felt ready for whatever challenges awaited her. But she also maintained the humble confidence her father had instilled in her years ago. The young woman who had grown up shooting targets in the Montana wilderness was now a qualified military sniper preparing for deployment to some of the most dangerous combat zones in the world. Elena knew that everything she had learned up to this point was preparation for moments she couldn't yet imagine, when her skills would be tested under pressure that would define her both as a soldier and as a person. Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez had been deployed to Forward Operating Base Chapman in eastern Afghanistan for 8 months when the intelligence report arrived that would change her life forever. The Taliban commander known as the Engineer had been responsible for sophisticated improvised explosive devices that had killed dozens of coalition forces over the past 2 years. Intelligence assets had finally located his position, but the tactical situation was unlike anything Elena's Ranger Battalion had encountered before. The Engineer was coordinating a major offensive from a compound positioned on a mountainside approximately 3,600 meters from the nearest coalition observation post. The distance was extraordinary, but the tactical situation was even more challenging. The compound was surrounded by civilian structures, and conventional airstrikes or artillery support would result in significant collateral damage. Ground assault was impossible because the approach would expose attacking forces to prepared defensive positions with clear fields of fire across several kilometers of open terrain. Captain Sarah Mitchell, Elena's company commander, called the sniper section together for a mission briefing that included operational details Elena had never heard discussed in a combat environment. The intelligence indicated that the Engineer would be directing the offensive from an elevated position within the compound, where he could observe the intended attack routes and coordinate with subordinate commanders. This target represents the kind of high-value elimination mission that Special Operations Forces train for throughout their careers, Captain Mitchell explained. But the tactical constraints make this unlike anything we've attempted before. The distance exceeds anything in our operational doctrine, and we'll have only one opportunity for engagement before the target relocates. Elena studied the intelligence photographs and topographic maps while Captain Mitchell outlined the mission parameters. The compound was positioned at an elevation approximately 800 meters higher than potential firing positions, which would significantly affect ballistic calculations. Weather reports indicated variable wind conditions that could change rapidly due to mountain terrain effects. Most challenging of all, the shot would have to be taken during a narrow window when the Engineer was expected to appear in an exposed position. "Rodriguez, Your marksmanship scores and technical background make you our best option for this engagement, Captain Mitchell said. But I need to be clear about what we're asking. The longest confirmed sniper kill in military history is 3,540 meters.
You would be attempting a shot that's 60 meters longer, under more difficult conditions, with no opportunity for ranging shots or adjustments. Elena felt the weight of the moment settling around her, like the mountain air itself. Everything she had learned about shooting, from her father's patient instruction to the intensive technical training at sniper school, had prepared her for situations exactly like this. But the magnitude of what was being requested was unlike anything she had ever attempted. "Ma'am, I need to see the firing position and confirm my ballistic calculations before I can give you a definitive answer," Elena replied. "But based on what you've described, I believe the shot is within the realm of possibility." Elena spent the next 18 hours preparing for what would either be the most successful engagement of her career or a failure that could compromise the entire operation. She climbed to the proposed firing position with her spotter, Sergeant First Class David Park, a veteran ranger who had worked with Elena on dozens of previous missions. The firing position was a rocky outcropping that provided excellent concealment and a clear line of sight to the target compound. Elena used a laser rangefinder to confirm the distance, 3,647 meters. The measurement was even longer than the intelligence estimate, which meant her ballistic calculations would need to account for additional bullet drop and time of flight. Elena's rifle was an M24 sniper weapon system chambered in .308 Winchester, the same platform she had trained with throughout her military career. She knew the rifle's capabilities intimately, but she also understood that she was pushing the weapon beyond its intended design parameters. The .308 cartridge was effective at long range, but it lost velocity and energy significantly over distances exceeding 3,000 meters. Working with Sergeant Park, Elena began the complex process of calculating a ballistic solution for the shot. They used weather monitoring equipment to measure wind speed and direction at their position, but they also had to estimate how wind conditions might vary along the bullet's flight path. The mountainous terrain would create unpredictable air currents that could deflect the bullet significantly. Temperature was another critical factor. The thin mountain air at their elevation would affect how the gunpowder burned, and how much velocity the bullet achieved when leaving the barrel. Elena had to adjust her calculations based on the ambient temperature and the temperature of her rifle barrel, which would change throughout the day as sunlight warmed the metal. The most challenging calculation involved elevation adjustments. The target was approximately 800 meters higher than Elena's firing position, which meant the bullet would be traveling upward for most of its flight path.
Gravity would slow the bullet more than normal, requiring significant compensation in her aiming point.
Elena spent hours working through the mathematical calculations, double-checking every variable and considering factors that might not be immediately obvious.
She calculated solutions for multiple scenarios, including different wind speeds and slight variations in range estimation. By the time she finished her preparation, Elena had developed what she believed was an accurate ballistic solution. But she also understood that theoretical calculations were only as good as the assumptions they were based on. The mission launch was scheduled for the following morning, when intelligence assets confirmed the engineer would be conducting his operational briefing. Elena and Sergeant Park moved into their final firing position before dawn, carrying equipment that included not only their standard sniper gear, but also additional weather monitoring instruments and backup ammunition. Elena's preparation routine was the same as it had been for every previous mission. But the psychological pressure was unlike anything she had experienced. She knew that success would eliminate a significant threat to coalition forces, but she also understood that failure might mean missing the only opportunity to stop an offensive that could cost many lives. As the sun rose over the Afghan mountains, Elena settled into her firing position and began the final preparation sequence her father had taught her years earlier. She controlled her breathing, checked her equipment one final time, and focused her mind on the technical aspects of the shot rather than its broader implications. At 0847 hours, Sergeant Park confirmed movement at the target compound through his spotting scope. "Elena, I've got personnel moving into the elevated position. Stand by for target identification."
Elena acquired the target area through her rifle scope and waited for the engineer to appear in the position intelligence had indicated he would use for his operational briefing. The magnification on her scope made the target appear closer than it actually was, but Elena reminded herself that the bullet would have to travel over 2 miles to reach its destination.
"Target confirmed," Sergeant Park announced. "Adult male, military age, elevated position, northwest corner of the compound. Range 3,647 meters, wind from the southwest at approximately 12 miles per hour." Elena made final adjustments to her scope settings and settled into the shooting position she had practiced thousands of times. Her breathing slowed to the rhythm her father had taught her, and her heart rate remained steady despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. The shot required Elena to aim significantly above and to the right of where the engineer appeared in her scope. Her calculated aiming point was approximately 15 feet high and 8 feet to the left of the target, compensating for bullet drop and wind drift over the extended flight time. Elena's finger found the trigger with the same gentle pressure she had been practicing since childhood. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed off the surrounding mountains, and Elena immediately began timing the bullet's flight. At the distance she was shooting, the bullet would take several seconds to reach its destination. Sergeant Park maintained observation of the target area, while Elena prepared for a potential follow-up shot. The seconds stretched endlessly as they waited to see the results of Elena's calculation and execution. "Hit!" Sergeant Park called out. "Confirmed target down. Elena, that was a perfect shot." Elena felt a mixture of relief and accomplishment that was unlike anything she had experienced previously. She had successfully engaged a target at a distance that exceeded the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history, under combat conditions that included significant tactical pressure and environmental challenges. The immediate aftermath of the shot was controlled chaos as Elena and Sergeant Park executed their extraction plan. Intelligence reports indicated that the engineer's elimination had disrupted the planned offensive, saving the lives of coalition forces who would have been targeted in the coordinated attacks. Elena's after-action report included precise documentation of her ballistic calculations, environmental conditions, and engagement procedures. When the report reached General Patricia Williams at Regional Command East, the general initially questioned whether the reported distance was accurate. The shot Elena had made exceeded established doctrine by such a significant margin that it seemed impossible. 3 separate investigations confirmed the accuracy of Elena's report. The distance was verified using multiple measurement methods, and the engagement was witnessed by several other personnel who could attest to the conditions under which the shot was taken. Elena's ballistic calculations were reviewed by military experts who confirmed that her mathematical approach was sound, even if the successful execution was extraordinary. General Williams personally reviewed Elena's service record and sniper training scores before authorizing the citation that would accompany Elena's Bronze Star Medal. The citation read, "For exceptionally meritorious conduct in the performance of outstanding service as a sniper in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez successfully engaged a high-value target at a range of 3,647 meters, exceeding the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history while operating under challenging environmental and tactical conditions." Elena's shot became a case study used in advanced marksmanship courses and special operations training programs. Military ballistics experts studied her calculations and methods to better understand the limits of current sniper weapon systems. Her success led to research into new rifles and ammunition types that could extend effective sniper ranges even further. But for Elena, the recognition and historical significance of her shot were secondary to the knowledge that her actions had protected fellow soldiers and contributed to mission success. As she prepared for her next deployment, Elena reflected on the path that had brought her from weekend shooting sessions in rural Montana to making history in the mountains of Afghanistan. The young woman who had learned patience and precision from her father had proven that with proper training, careful preparation, and unwavering focus, even seemingly impossible challenges could be overcome. Elena's shot represented more than just exceptional marksmanship. It demonstrated the potential for individual excellence to make a significant difference in the outcome of complex military operations. General Williams concluded her review of Elena's case by noting that the shot represented exactly the kind of innovative problem-solving and technical excellence that modern military operations required. In an era of increasingly complex threats and challenging operational environments, Elena had shown that well-trained individuals could still achieve extraordinary results through skill, preparation, and determination. Elena Rodriguez had joined the Army to serve her country and test herself against the highest standards of military excellence. Her 647-meter shot proved that she had achieved both goals, setting a new standard for what was possible in military marksmanship while eliminating a threat that had endangered countless lives. The shot would be remembered as a milestone in military history, but Elena knew it was also a testament to the patient instruction her father had provided and the rigorous training the Army had invested in her development as a professional soldier.